Hello everyone, hope you've all had a good day today. Plenty of good talks across all three tracks. Thanks for letting us speak for today and finish with the closing keynote. So today we're going to talk about growing as an MSSP SOC, the challenges that we faced, and then also what we wanted to do was kind of give people more of an idea about what happens in a SOC, different roles, what to expect. We kind of felt that because we both went to Abertay, as we'll introduce ourselves in a few minutes, that there wasn't as much information about blue teaming and SOCs in general as we would have hoped. Hopefully this can give more of an insight into it. So let's get started. So just to introduce myself, I'm Danny Henderson. As I just mentioned, I went to Abertay in 2016. I did the MSc, Ethical Hacking and Computer Security. From there, I went into an in-house SOC at a large bank. Stayed in the financial sector in Edinburgh, moving into security architecture and then vulnerability management. I then, a year and a half ago, moved to Quorum Cyber, where I'm now one of the SOC managers. What we kind of want to talk about is that, there's different roles out there. As I mentioned, we'll talk about a few of them. We've both had a variety of different roles. So that's myself anyway.
Hi everyone, I'm Stan. I started in Abertay in 2015 as a computing student. End of my first year, I've moved to the ethical hacking degree because I thought it was a little bit more interesting. I've then done the accelerated degree, and I graduated with the honours in 2018, and from then started my first role as an SOC analyst in a large bank for an in-house SOC. As Danny said just now, basically, at the time I had no idea what I'm going to be doing. I just know I was joining a security operations centre, going to look at some stuff. But there was not much information out there, but I thought I'll give it a go. I started as an analyst, stayed there for a while, then I got promoted to a senior analyst. And then I decided I wanted to do something different than in-house stuff, so I moved to an MSSP. I was a principal security analyst there. I helped grow the SOC, improve processes. And after about a year and a bit there, I moved to Quorum because I thought it was a little bit more exciting, and it's quite a small company that was growing. So I joined last May as a senior SOC analyst there. A little bit about Quorum. It was founded in Edinburgh in 2016, and now it's one of the fastest growing cybersecurity companies in the UK. It was just a few employees in 2017. A few years later, it had 75 employees in 2020. And then as of now, we're about 180 people and counting. Obviously, we're growing a lot because there's a lot of cybersecurity stuff happening out there. So there's a lot of new clients being onboarded, and therefore we need more people to look after them. Last year, we recruited 12 graduates for our grad program, hoping that this year is going to be about double that, but there's more information on the website.
So I thought we'd just talk about a brief history of SOCs. The first knitted SOCs were found in...
No, that's the wrong one, Danny.
Oh.
There we go.
Really glad at least one person laughed at that, because we were really worried about that. But let's actually talk about a brief history of SOCs. Obviously, we've only been in the industry a few years, but it can stem back to the kind of mid-1990s. Back then, it was mainly health monitoring. It was the availability of devices. And then, various alerts based off of that incident detection. Between 1995 to 2006, you could kind of go into reactive monitoring. This is when you would see the implementation of different solutions like antivirus, intrusion detection. They would add to the kind of number of signals that you got in, and that would give you more accurate results for alerts and whatnot. When you go into this phase, you go more away from the original implementation of SOCs, which was mainly kind of military-based. You moved into kind of large enterprises, banks, that kind of things. You then move into proactive monitoring. So this is kind of when the introduction of MSSPs, which we'll go on to discuss in a few minutes, started. It was the introduction of SIEM tools and DLP, which allowed more and more signals to be congregated into one kind of solution and then acted upon from there. And then kind of in the last few years, as I'm sure you've all kind of heard, there's been more implementation of kind of automation and machine learning. So that would be proactive monitoring with more automation on the side of it. This kind of era made it more available to kind of smaller enterprises and businesses, whereas before it was more larger.
So the two types of SOCs there are basically you have your own in-house SOC and you also have MSSPs. So in an in-house SOC, basically what you're going to have is going to be a department, organization, usually part of IT, that will be dedicated specifically to monitoring the company's network and look for any security events happening and investigate them as needed. With the need to have 24/7 coverage, you need to have bigger experience, you need to be looking at a lot of stuff. This is not really a feasible option for especially smaller companies. So that's why, as I mentioned in the previous slide, basically the need for MSSP came in. So with an MSSP, which is a managed security service provider, what you got is basically an external company that will do all your security needs, such as Quorum. So with specifically for the SOC, what we have basically is you're going to have the 24/7 monitoring, you're going to have the expertise of analysts that are looking through a variety of different clients. You're going to have access to a variety of incident response, offensive security, just different services that you, as small companies, probably won't be able to afford. And this is also a key difference between the two. So in an in-house SOC, you're typically going to be a smaller team. You're going to have smaller budget to play with. You're going to have a smaller tools, like basically less tools to use within your company. So most of the time it's seen as a cost to the business. Whereas with an MSSP, you have typically a larger team, because obviously you're going to be looking across a variety of companies. You need the resourcing to be able to do that. You're going to have a bigger budget. You're going to have access to slightly different tools in order to be able to do your job better. And obviously, as it's a service provider, the revenue comes from customers, so it's not seen as sort of a cost to the business. There are pros and cons for both as well. Depending on the in-house, so you might have a little bit bigger say on how the security is done in your company in terms of like process and compliance and stuff like that. Sometimes that's not always the case. So depending on the need, there's pros and cons for both in-house and MSSP SOCs. So starting your career in a SOC, what can you expect? Usually what people start in the SOCs are either a SOC analyst or a SOC engineer. So the SOC analyst basically pretty much is the people that are on the front line. What they do is they'll monitor, they'll triage security alerts, anything that comes in for specifically in our SOC, we'll have like a variety of clients. We'll monitor the networks, alerts come in, they'll go ahead, triage it, investigate it. They'll need to communicate sometimes with the clients, whatever is happening. If there's a cyber incident happening, they might need to speak with a client, confirm what's the deal, explain to them the situation. They'll also be working with other people in the team to work on like the develop playbooks, develop threat hunts depending on what emerging threats there are, and overall just collaborating with the team as a whole and also with other teams, which we'll cover a little bit later on. As a SOC engineer, the primarily need for them is to basically look at the back end of the service and make sure everything runs smoothly. That goes from anything from tuning alerts to which basically will improve the service, and you can make sure that everything runs smoothly. And they'll be reviewing proactively alerts so that to make sure everything's fine there. They'll also be identifying improvements for specific rule sets that will actually trigger on the back of a variety of events, so then the analyst can investigate them. And as well, they'll also be triaging emerging issues within the SOC and just work with the whole engineering team to prioritize stuff that needs to happen in order to keep the service running as best as it can. In terms of progression opportunity in the SOC, obviously there's the senior versions of both roles. The senior SOC analysts, the information there kind of covers both senior and principals. Like, it really depends on the company you're working with. Role names are not everything. Sometimes one role can be doing one thing in one company, and then the same role in a different company can be doing 5 different things on top of it. But primarily, the role for the senior analyst is basically to help normal analysts whenever they have a need for it. Basically, they act as an escalation point. They mentor them and support them whenever there's a need for it, and make sure that they progress as they should. They also look into improving the overall quality of alerts, and just look into how best they can improve the quality of the service. We also work with a variety of clients on various engagements in order to basically make sure that the client gets what they need, and everything that they need to be receiving from a service perspective is happening as it should be. We also do, as a senior analyst, basically also involved in a lot of the developing internal process and making sure those are followed, and making sure the service basically progresses, doesn't stay stagnant. There's always need to improve something. For a senior SOC engineer, is pretty much all the engineer tasks that they're doing that I mentioned earlier on. However, they're also going to be organizing and running the day-to-day stuff. They're a little bit more management-oriented, but it's pretty much just the senior version of it. Again, acting as an escalation point, just someone with a little bit more experience that can help and mentor junior engineers. Obviously, those are not just the 2 roles, but those are the most prevalent ones. From the SOC, there's a lot of people go and do incident response. They can go and do digital forensics. Some people decide to go and deal with the compliance and DLP, like the data loss prevention. There we go. Side of things. So depending on what you want to do, there's a variety of opportunities to develop.
So obviously, the title of the presentation is "Challenges of a Growing MSSP." Shout out to ChatGPT for helping us out with the title of that. I really like this diagram here. It kind of shows that, in every operations team, probably in every business, there's always challenges that will then feed into other ones, which will then feed into other ones. The 4 that we want to focus on today were customer service, resourcing, technology and solutions, and then also training. So customer service. In my opinion, in our opinion, what's just as important as technical skills is soft skills. I think we've talked about this to the people that we've seen at the recruitment stands. There's a few talks that I've seen have also touched on this as well. Building and maintaining relationships is so important in operations, especially in MSSPs. With an MSSP, you have multiple customers from multiple different backgrounds, different security knowledges. They'll have different needs as well, and then they might also have more collaboration with you. So communicating with confidence is a very key skill as well. As I just mentioned, there's going to be companies from different industries, and they'll have different reasons for acquiring your service, and they might have different levels of knowledge. So you have to tailor your language to suit the audience. For example, if you're dealing with a large financial firm, you might be dealing with someone that has a lot more security knowledge than someone that works for a small charity, or just another industry that might have a different outlook on security. So one thing to always remember, and I think that this is good advice for anyone that's leaving university, going into the first job. I would have liked this advice myself, is when you go into somewhere like an MSSP, remember that you're the expert. You're the one that they've hired to do a job and to give your expertise on something. Not everyone needs to know everything. That's why you work as a team. But being able to communicate not only with the customer but also with your peers will definitely help you out with this. So collaboration, I just talked about that briefly. What makes a service better is if you're constantly collaborating with the customer and being able to improve on the service that you're giving to them. This can be through regular operations calls, where you can, convey any concerns that you have. You can pass over intelligence, any sort of, scanning activity that's going on, any issues that they may have with certain users, or any threats they may have had a tip on. And just an example of great customer service that we've experienced, building and maintaining relationships. We had a customer recently who was onboarded because of a tactical reason. There was an incident which caused us to onboard them quite quickly. We've since maintained quite a healthy relationship with them, constantly collaborating with them, sharing knowledge. This has then caused them to speak to others in their industry and provide good reference, which has then got us more business. More business means more customers, which means that we learn more. So the next thing I want to talk about is resourcing. Selecting the right people is obviously very important. You look for a wide variety of skill sets. And the reason I say that is it's important to remember that not everyone is going to know everything. But, I certainly don't. It's good to know that who you have in your team that you can turn to for certain things. You also should understand an attacker's mindset and also be empathetic to a customer situation. We need to remember that when a customer is coming to you for support or when they ask you for a service, there's a reason for that. They're either concerned about something, they're under legal obligation to have you there, or some similar reason to that. So this diagram here on the right, I like this. So what this is trying to convey is analysts are obviously primarily there for incident handling. They look into investigations, but that information doesn't just stop there. So this depicts a kind of life cycle. So the information that you might get from an incident that's been handled could then go into threat intelligence, which then goes into use case development. So the information that you get from this analyst at the point of the investigation doesn't stop there. It could go all the way through to use case development. And the reason that is because an analyst would, say if they did the same type of investigation repeatedly, or if they spotted a pattern, they might be able to provide more context for the next time that this happened. When we are looking at selecting the right people, we need to try and look and see if we can find someone that's kind of well-rounded that might have analytical skills that would extend past just investigations. So another challenge is balancing headcount. So this happens in every business, especially in operations. It's a constant balance between the total required output that you need and how many staff that would require. I think it's fair to say that everyone's heard the cliche of cybersecurity is constantly evolving, changing. That is something that is constantly in the minds of people that are recruiting. Because not only do you have to adapt to various threats, you have to base your resourcing off of that fact. So if there's over the past few years, artificial intelligence has become more important. That might mean that in the next few years, that would be one of the main factors in recruiting. It's a constantly evolving landscape. Another thing is adapting to customers' coverage requirements. So at the core of it, a security operations center is there to provide security coverage for a customer's estate over various time periods. Quorum and most SOCs have customers, most MSSP, have customers around the UK or internationally. So these are going to be on different time zones. They'll need different various levels of coverage. So sometimes it might be 24 by 7. Sometimes just through specific outside of business hours, things like that. So that's something that we always have to bear in mind.
The next thing I'm going to talk about is basically training and knowledge sharing. So obviously, because of COVID, a lot of companies have went remote. So that put a specifically interesting challenge in actually training staff, especially when it comes to people that are new to SOCs. So it's a specific challenge being effective while being remote as well, because obviously everyone has different styles of learning. Everyone has preferred method that they prefer to learn. So basically training people in the same manner doesn't always help absolutely everyone. So we have, through experience, through some mistakes, errors, we've managed to come up with what I think a quite robust training plan, which basically we make sure every new analyst that we get is trained up to the same standard through the means that actually help them, rather than just having a specific one way that we just sort of convey that information. On top of that, we also have continuous mentoring, as mentioned earlier on, basically primarily from the senior analyst to offer support and to do a little bit of quality control. With the continuous mentoring, basically, again, the whole point is to make sure that the analysts provide the best service they can to the customer, that their investigations are on point, that they don't miss stuff, they pay attention to details, and just share the knowledge that the senior team will have through the years of experience. They share it with the junior analysts, and they can actually learn from that. We also do quality control just to make sure everything is in top notch. That will mean through checking investigations, speaking with analysts, making sure everything's all right, and just overall looking through the work to make sure everything's basically the customers are getting the best service they can. There's also a lot of collaboration between different teams. So as Danny mentioned earlier on, anything that happens in the SOC doesn't just stay in the SOC. That is contextual information that could be used by other teams. And that collaboration is really needed to make sure that specific stuff that happened for one client might be relevant to a different client. So when we have the collaboration between different teams, for example, the customer success team, what they can do is, if there's a specific emerging threat for one client that we've seen, if they manage with a few different clients that are in the same industry, obviously they can speak with them and they can tell them, right, we've seen this happen in sort of your industry. What we could do for you is we can do X, Y, Z. You can look into this one, just to basically make sure that we don't just keep information in one place. It's shared with the wider team, so then we can help as many customers as we can. And another important part of the knowledge sharing is basically documentation of processes. I'm sure lots of you will know, basically, documentation is really needed part of everything. When it comes to coursework, obviously you have to write reports, because this is the way of you conveying the information that you've learned or you found. So it's the same thing with MSSP SOC, basically. Any process that are in place should have a good documentation. This ensures that anyone coming after you knows exactly what needs to happen. Basically, every other team would be aware of the exact process that takes place. So then everyone knows where the different people involved in a specific, whether it's an investigation, an incident, everyone knows what needs to happen and everyone is upfront about it. I'm going to talk about a little bit technology solutions. As Danny said, it's an ever-emerging landscape, so we have to keep up with the threat actors in some shape or form. So the main way that the SOC works basically is we have detection rules that we fire on specific events happening. We're going to have a standard set case of rules that are based on just generic threats, whether that's unknown devices, sign-in attempts, authentication, whatever. So those will be deployed across the customer base. However, we do have some bespoke rule sets for different clients, different industries, depending on the threats each of them they have and depending on the threat model they have. However, all of those rule sets, obviously they're going to trigger on specific set of thresholds and something actually happening. However, there's a lot of stuff in a day-to-day business that could trigger false positives, just benign activity that is expected to occur but also has triggered one of our alerts. So in order to fight that, basically we have tuning of alerts. As I mentioned earlier, there's both ad hoc and regular tuning depending on the need of the client and depending on how noisy they are. And on the back of that, we also have automation that is there to enrich alerts and make sure that it helps the analyst to have all the information needed so they are best prepared when they're doing an investigation. And as we said earlier, basically, because of the ever-changing threat landscape, different clients will use different vendors for their needs. Either it's firewalls, IDS, IPSs, whatever you want. They will use a variety of them. There's not going to be many customers using the exact same set of technologies. So in order to basically keep up with that, we need to be up to date with all the documentation of it. We need to be aware of, excuse me, what the customers are using and how they're using it, because on the back of the information we receive from those technologies and those solutions, we need to carry out our investigation. And that's why, as Danny mentioned earlier, it's very good to have a good communication with your client, because being upfront and knowing what they have, they will let you know what's happening with their environment. They will let you know when there's new products and new solutions being deployed, which will then, on the back of that, help you have better investigations and will help you do a better analysis. There's a little piece about threat intelligence as well. Obviously, with emerging threats, we have a threat intelligence team that will feed us information about emerging threats, and then we will go ahead and do threat hunts, and whether that's for a specific customer again or the whole industry and everyone we have in that industry. We're going to carry out threat hunts, find out if there's anything specifically happening, and just basically try and proactively save the customer. And someone might be wondering, why is all this needed? Basically, the need of all of this is to basically lower the ticket fatigue, what it's called, basically when analysts are investigating a lot of the same alerts that are just benign, but just false positives. They're noisy stuff that are just wasting time of actually quality investigations that can actually bring suspicious and malicious events up to the surface. So, as Danny mentioned earlier on about the customers coming from incident response, this is one of the best examples for this one. Whenever a customer comes in from an incident response into the SOC, when they're onboarded, in order to make sure we monitor everything, we put them in a heightened monitoring schedule sort of thing, where we just throw all the standard rules we have on them to basically start alerting, but we're also going to add in some bespoke ones specifically to the threat and specifically to the cyber incident they're dealing with. However, what happens is, because they go through a rapid onboarding into our service, none of this is going to be tuned. So we're going to get a lot of alerts for stuff that is benign just because it's a new customer, and because there's a need to immediately start monitoring to make sure nothing else happens past that incident. There's going to be a lot of noisy alerts that basically can sort of hide away actual malicious activity. So that's why we go through tunings, that's why we go through automation and basically trying to reduce the false positive rate in order to make sure that the only alerts we're getting are actually quality alerts that can bring up any suspicious or malicious activity. And that's all for us. We'll take some questions right now. No questions? We've done a pretty good job then. Yeah. There's a little bit of a challenge if anyone wants to try it. Don't know what it is.
Work it out.
You can find out. But if anyone wants to speak with us, we're going to be down here for a few minutes. Thank you.